Hi everyone, this is Dimitris from Ilios 3D. In this video I want to talk to you about the web interface which is available on the Ilios UI electronics. To enable the web interface, first of all make sure that you enable the Ethernet connection within the settings inside the user interface. Also, within the settings, make sure that you have enabled the web interface itself. In the info menu, note the IP address which is automatically assigned, or the IP address which you assigned manually to the user interface. That is the IP address which you are going to enter in your web browser. As a side note, please know that the user interface and the web interface, which is included inside the firmware, is available on the Ilios Photon, Ilios Beam. It is by default also on Ilios Ray, and the Ilios kits which have been chosen with the user interface module as an option in our shop. You can also purchase the Ilios electronics from our shop separately to upgrade your existing electronics which were depreciated after we designed the new Ilios electronics. So if you have the new Ilios electronics, you essentially don't need to have a PC. You can just use a USB storage device. It doesn't have to be even a micro SD. It can be a USB hard drive or any other device which has a USB port on it. So let's begin. After you have noted the IP address and enabled everything which was said before, the web interface should be functional. Also note that you can forward the IP address and as well as the port on your router if you have a router, and access the web interface remotely from anywhere in the world. You will notice that in your browser, instead of a website address, just enter the IP address which you noted in the info panel. In our case, this is going to be 192.168.128. Just type that in and press enter. You will find the login screen, which is the first thing you will see, as well as the firmware version. Currently the firmware version is 1.27.490, which basically changes all the time, so they don't take that as a granted, because we created a system which updates automatically the firmware through the web. So right now this is the version, but it changes all the time, so we make new builds almost every week, if not sooner. If there is a bug, we do it sooner. And yes, we do have sometimes bugs because it's a complicated system and it took us a long time to develop it, so it has a lot of features, so bear with me. The password which you will see in the login screen, is basically the password which you saw when you enabled the web interface. The password is noted there, and you can also change it on the touch screen itself to anything you like, so the connection is secure and you don't just pop into the user interface directly. So type in the password which you have on your touch screen. In our case, by default it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and press login. So the first screen you're going to see is going to be the home screen. In the top panel you will see the processor usage, memory, as well as disk usage. This is mostly useful when you are making a long print, so that you can see the status of the CPU on board the user interface. And also it helps us debug the system if there is a memory leak or anything else, but it's a nice feature and we just have it. In this specific interface, we have the levels for the cartridges, pigments, and as well as the VAT and mix tanks, because this user interface was taken from the Ilios Ray. And Ilios Ray, based on viscosities and other settings which we'll go into further, can calculate the cartridge levels as well as all the other liquid levels inside the machine. If you have Ilios Laser or Ilios Photon or even the Ilios HD kits, those don't have any levels, so basically these parameters don't show up anything. Also on the left you will find the links to the shop, to our forum, as well as the support, which is basically the product documentation. The user interface inside the web is mostly navigated through the top menus. You will see here Home, Models, Camera, Control, Options, and Info. The Info panel will essentially show you what you will see on the Info panel on the Ilios UI on the touchscreen. So you will see the firmware version you have right now, the model of the printer, which is Ilios Ray in our case, the serial number of the printer, the IP address which you are using, this is for the wireless, as well as the net mask and other network options. Also, you will note that the user interface calculates the uptime and print time, and this is the uptime basically means how long has the printer been turned on for, regardless of if it was printing or not, as well as print time, which is basically for how long the printer has been printing from that time. This helps us see how much the printer was used. And also in the case of a warranty, we calculate the warranty based on these numbers. So let's go back to Home and let's go to Models. Inside the Models window, you will find all of the models which are currently located on your USB drive. Now you can also drag and drop files directly from your PC to this window or delete them from here, and also this window is where you're going to start the print. So if you have a model, you just select print it and it will start printing it. Also on the model information you will see how many layers there are, how many columns. Well, the columns are mostly for the Ilios Ray, because it calculates prints differently due to its scan line. Also, you will see the time, which is approximated from the Ilios 3D Suite, and the material in milliliters, which is going to be needed for the model. Let's go back to the menu now, and in the menu, if you have the option for the camera, Ilios Ray by default has an embedded camera inside the machine, so let's go there. The camera itself is in real time. Currently we have the camera disabled, but it shows the video in real time, so you can see what the printer is doing. This is not only for Ilios Ray, this is also for the HD kits and any other printer which has the user interface and the camera. Here you can do screenshots. The screenshots are automatically saved on the USB drive itself inside the screenshots folder, so you can make snapshots and save them as you print along. Okay, let's go back to the controls now. The controls of the printer depend on the type of printer you have. In this case we have the controls for Ilios Ray, but these controls are mostly the same for all the printers, except for the UV strips which we have on Ilios Ray, also the detachment lift option, and the resins and pigment functions which are dedicated to Ilios Ray, which basically control the if you want to empty the cartridges, fill them, clean them, or anything else. We won't go too much into these details because this is mostly printer dependent. But in short, the controls which you see here, on the left you will see the lift detachment button, which basically detaches the model with its spikes on Ilios Ray. Also you will find the UV curing strips. You can enable or disable the UV light on Ilios Ray. The preview button basically creates a preview scan line which sets the dots so you can adjust the scale of the scan line, and it helps us fix some other parameters basically to calibrate it, but you can also just see if the laser works fine by clicking on it. The sliding option is available on Ilios Ray as well as on the Ilios HD kits, which have the option for the sliding watt, so you can just slide it manually here. Also the home button will essentially lift the lift up to its home position, which is going to be the highest position. Also it will toggle it to the bottom of the build platform if it's Ilios Ray. And also you have the up and down buttons. These buttons are for the lift and you can move it up or down. The same controls, and I mean exactly the same controls, are located on the touch screen. So this will be very familiar to you. You can control the printer exactly the same way as you would through a touchscreen. Even in the case of a web interface, because you have the drag and drop options and other things, it's much easier to control it through the web interface instead of the touchscreen. Again, this is specifically for Ilios Ray, but in short, the buttons on the right. The first one is to purge the entire system. That will empty everything into the purge port. Then you can reset the pigments, reset the cartridges. That's for resetting the levels. If you have a new cartridge which it's already full, and if you have the pigments and you fill them up, you press the reset pigments and reset cartridge, and it will indicate in the home menu that the cartridges are all now filled, and it will start counting down based on volumes and based on the speed of the pumps and everything else to calculate and estimate the levels of the liquid inside the machine. So you need to do this if the printer basically doesn't know how much resin it has inside. Now the other button is the clean button. It will basically clean everything which is inside the machine. It will start pumping out liquid from the pigment tank number 4 because it's the biggest one. The other 3, 1 through 3, are the smaller pigment tanks, which are mainly used for the pigments, since we mostly use the 4th tank for the cleaning solution, which in our case is alcohol. The empty vat, well, essentially that's what it does. It empties the vat on the machine manually into the mix tank, and from there into a purge tank. It will ask you once you press on it where you want to empty it. The same goes to the empty cartridge button, which essentially empties the cartridge into a selected location. It may be the mix tank, it may be the purge port, as well as other options which we have for the specific printer. Then we have the cleaning the vat and cleaning the cartridges, as well as refilling the cartridges button. Now the material controls are mostly Ilios Ray dedicated once again, but you will mostly likely not see these options, most of them, for the rest of the kits, because there isn't much control over the resins inside of them. Okay, now let's go into the options menu, and inside the options menu you will see the printer model, which essentially, if you did a clean flash of and loaded a new image on a micro SD from our website, in the file sections you need to choose the correct printer you have, because this is what determines the initialization sequence for the control unit. So if you have Ilios Ray, you must select Ilios Ray, because that's what the user interface is going to tell the control board to initialize. And you should be very careful about this, because if you don't choose it correctly, the control board will control everything the way it thinks it should control it, and if you have a different printer you might not break it, but you will see erratic actions. For example, the lift will start moving down, or something will turn on or off, so just check this. Also, you can check the type of a printer you have in the info panel as well. If you go inside the info panel, you will see the model name is Ilios Ray in this case. So the printer model determines the initialization sequence as well as any other commands which are going to be used by the printer for the specific printer. Also in the options menu, a very important menu is the log. The log helps us identify any problems which may occur. Also it logs every action, so that as well as you can also check it if there is a problem, or just to see what the printer is doing. You can do this from the web interface. This includes for the debugging, this includes also the initialization sequences and everything else. The update menu will essentially update the firmware if there is a new version on the web. You can press the check button, it will check and download the required firmware. Currently the firmware is up to date, so there is no need to update it. The clock, the clock doesn't really do much right now. It does choose the time to show on the touch screen, but other than that it doesn't really affect the uptime or print time timers on the printer. So it's mostly a cosmetic feature for now, and we haven't figured out what we should use it for. Now in the options menu, the port window doesn't really do much except from telling you what the actual communication speeds are between the user interface and the control unit. In our case, the baud rate is 460,800, which is default for the time being. We had it faster, but we had to slow it down a bit. So if you want to change the settings, that's done in another menu. Again, the web controls, these are essentially the same controls as you will find on the touchscreen interface. Here you can choose the port as well as the passport and enable or disable it. If you press disable here, it will basically just disable the user interface. In the wireless settings, again, you have the IP address. You can choose it to be manual, or you can make it so that the Wi-Fi will automatically assign one. The SSID for the Wi-Fi and the password if you will connect to the machine through your mobile device. And again, enable or disable it. And the same goes for the Ethernet. Just leave it as defaults if you don't know what they do, and it's going to be fine. You don't need to do anything here because we already set the default settings for you.